There!
Okay. I'd like to introduce Peter Barrett, VK6FUN. I met Peter as an amateur radio operator and frequently used to chat to him on air on 2 meters while driving to and from work. One day Peter asked me how I was in a wheelchair, and I told him a bit of a story. I got a very startling response back from Peter, so I'll turn it over to Peter. Peter, maybe you can tell that story.
Yes, well, basically I realised the moment he told me what type of car he was driving and when he was driving it and when he was in it. He was in the passenger seat, I think. And when it happened and the type of car, I realised that I had actually seen the accident, albeit from quite a few kilometres away, because it was on the Nullarbor plain, which is basically just very, very, very straight roads where you can see up to 10 kilometres in front of you. We were travelling, I think it was either Cocklebiddy or Mundrabilla, I can't remember which, but we were travelling along at very early in the morning on a Saturday morning, and we could see taillights up ahead of us way in the distance, and we noticed that the taillights were becoming erratic, swinging from one side to the road to the other, and then we saw dust coming up, and we thought, oh, something bad's going on here. Then a huge cloud of dust, headlights as well, and we formed the opinion at that moment that the car had rolled over. So sure enough, when we got to it, it would appear to have rolled about 3 or 4 times. It was right way up, and I'm trying to recall exactly which direction it was facing. I think at right angles to the road, or thereabouts. And about 10-20 metres off the shoulder, maybe 40 metres. Hard to say, hard to remember that. But all the doors were swung open. The driver was sitting in the driver's seat trying to start the vehicle, and someone who was in the passenger seat, an older, more portly gentleman in the rear passenger seat, had got out of the car and was wandering around rather dazed and looking for his Christmas presents, which had been strewn throughout the bush, or the spinifex. The only one that wasn't moving was the guy in the passenger seat. So we went around and asked him if he was okay, and a fairly weak voice came back and said, "I can't move my legs, so my legs are stuck." And we sort of had a look, and we could see his toes. We said, "We can see your toes, mate, try and move them." He said, "No, I can't, no, they're definitely stuck." So we basically said, "Look mate, keep real still." We knew that the police were on their way, even without calling them, because we had seen them at the previous roadhouse where they were having some breakfast, and they mentioned that they would be following us some 10 to 15 minutes behind us, and sure enough, within about 15 odd minutes the police turned up from a westerly direction, and they proceeded to take over. They said there was not much more we could do, and we could continue on our journey, so that's what we did. It was around about 4:30 in the morning, I would have said. It was just one of many prangs we saw that day. It was, or that trip, it was, the road between Perth and Melbourne was strewn with cars that had all attempted obviously to get somewhere for Christmas and failed. So we didn't really think that much of it at the time. We thought, yeah, everybody seems to be alive, which was more than we could say for some of the other prangs we saw on that trip. But yes, we thought it was that the guy in the passenger seat didn't look too good.
Thank you, Peter. I'd actually organised my trip through Travel Mates, which was a firm that put you in contact with people who were travelling by car, and you could organise this with them by paying part of the petrol fee. And I had organised this lift. I wanted to go trekking up into New Guinea for the summer months, and this was a very cheap trip to Melbourne. The fellow was driving a Volvo and he was middle-aged, so I thought it was probably a pretty good bet. And he had another driver. The only difficulty seemed to be that he had to get to Adelaide by the next day, so he wanted to travel all night. He had all his Christmas presents and he was in a big rush to get home for Christmas. So that meant an all-night travel. But I took the lift, probably against my better judgment, and it would be my recommendation to people not to take a lift like that. But we set off, and none of us had been drinking. We were drinking lots of coffee. The only probably problem was that I didn't really know the third person. He was a Russian migrant who had only just recently got his driver's license. So he really wasn't that familiar with driving. He was driving at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he simply fell asleep at the wheel. And the car began to wander off the road. You can picture the scene. It's the middle of a dead flat desert, with a few scrubby bushes. There's no rocks, large rocks or trees. There's nothing to hit. No telephone poles, nothing. Just dead flat, desolate plain. And it's hard to believe that one would actually run off the road and roll over. I mean, all you have to do is keep a straight line and take your foot off the gas. You could coast for miles through the desert. But he succeeded in rolling the car probably 3 or 4 times. And I had my seatbelt done up and shoulder harness, and the doctor thinks that probably I got jerked forward hard against the shoulder harness, snapping my neck and severing my spinal cord, the C5-6, that is between the 5th and the 6th cervical vertebrae. And I severed it totally. The x-rays seemed to indicate that it was probably a good 2 centimeters out of alignment. So it rendered me a quadriplegic at quite a high level. But after Peter had left, they got me by ambulance to Kalgoorlie, and then they flew me by the flying doctor service to Perth.
Probably the best thing to do would have been to just hold the steering wheel, travel in a straight line, because it's dead flat desert there, and if you just keep going in a straight line, just because there's no road doesn't mean you're going to roll over.
Well, thank you, Peter, for your input on that.
Yeah, no worries, and it's one of those things that change your life. It was over 20 years later, and I had just finished a 25-year career in Telstra, and found myself enjoying a bit of ham radio in the morning, talking to all the commuters, and one of them was Don, and it was sort of like it was the second time I met him, and there was roughly 25 years in between. So to me it proved that what an incredibly small world it is.
Thank you.